So picking up where we left off last time, we had used a reset on this file. Let's go back to our code editor, and you see here's what we've done on this reset right here. And what we need now is we need to actually start styling it with our own custom style sheet. So we don't have that yet. We haven't made it. So let's go ahead and go up here to File, and we'll say New. And I'm going to choose where it says CSS. We'll hit Create, and it gives me a blank character set document. All right, so we'll go ahead and save this. And the place where I'm going to save it is in my Project1 folder. I'm not going to give it its own CSS folder. I'm just going to save it right there in the root adjacent to the template file. So we'll call it styles.css. All right, now it's created. I'm going to go ahead and close it. And I'm also going to close the reset. And the reason is that I'm going to attach them, and then they'll show up right here in Dreamweaver. They'll show up as attachments. And I like to keep things closed in case I accidentally open a file from a different place and then I don't get confused. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this link file for the reset, and I'll drop down to the next line, and I will put it there, and I'm going to rename the reset.css to styles.css. Okay, and so now if I save it, those two things are attached, and you see right here, boom, it pops up if I click it here. And that's why I like to keep these tabs closed as just a reiteration. This way I know for a fact that if I'm in this reset or in this styles.css style sheet, I am in the one that is actually attached to my source code, to my template.php page. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is go over here to styles, and we had mentioned the thing about the viewport, and I need to actually do an additional little piece of information in the style sheet to make this viewport. This is what I'm referring to, the meta name viewport, right, where it says content width equals device width. I actually, to make this fully functional in all corresponding devices, I need to go back into styles, and I need to add something. So I'm going to do this thing called @viewport. And before I do the regular @viewport, I'm going to do one that's like a hack for Microsoft. So it's like this. So here you want to type width and then give it a value of device width. And the reason that you want to do this is because this will help the browser, for mobile browsers, it helps it understand how to deal with resolution. And because if you look at mobile devices, a pixel is not a pixel anymore when it comes to what we think of as an actual pixel in pixel resolution, because of the issue of pixel density now with these really high quality phone screens. There might be the equivalent of 3 pixels inside of the space of 1 pixel in terms of what's referred to pixel density. And so you don't want the website to look really tiny because it's trying to display all of the pixels on the page. So what it does is it sort of effectively zooms in so that it behaves in a more proportional way. And what I can do here is I can just copy this. I'm going to right click, copy this, and okay. And so what I want to get rid of is this switch at the beginning that is the -ms-. So I'm going to just do @viewport. And the reason that I put the one that's the hack first, the switch first, is because it will read that for anything that is going to actually read it, anything that needs it, and then the @viewport will just be ignored by the browser that would have required this. Okay, all right, so and if you want to learn more about this, I don't want to spend a lot of time going into it. If you go first, I guess, just do a Google search for @viewport, and then down here is the basic viewport information, but then the article that I want you to read, if you get a chance to read this and you want to learn more about it, is this one called Using the Viewport, blah, 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 and it was issued on April 2017. It's this article, and it actually gives you a lot of really useful information so that you can understand control a lot better for mobile devices. Okay, so let's jump back over here and make sure that we've got that saved. I don't have it saved, so let's go File, Save. And the thing is, you're not really going to notice any difference whenever you go to test it right now. So let's just do that really fast. If I go over here and I hit refresh, it doesn't look any different. First of all, this is not a mobile device, but even if I were on my phone, let's say I could go into my control panel on my computer, Windows or a Mac, and I could figure out what the local address is for this, not localhost. It would have to be like on, for instance, on a Mac, I could go up here to System Preferences, and then I could come to my network. And this would be different on Windows. You'd have to do this differently. But just to give you an idea, I could go click on Advanced, and then I could go to TCP/IP. This is the current address, that the IP address that my computer is in on my network. So as long as I'm on the same wireless network, say on my phone, as I am on my computer in the same house, then I could easily just type in that address on my phone, and I could go and see what it looks like, you know, on a mobile device. So you can use that to, you know, test in live view with your mobile device what your stuff is looking like. Anyway, if I were to go and do that right now, it's not really going to significantly look different either. It might look a little bit different, but not very much, because I haven't really tried to push things around and make them fit into containers and all of that stuff, right? That's whenever, you know, you really start to, it starts to make a difference when you start to tell things how big to be, and right, it does make a big difference then. Okay, so this is just an important part of page setup so that later everything works the way you intend for it to work. Okay, and another thing that we want to do that's part of best practices in page setup at the very beginning is to go ahead and define box sizing with the value of border box for a lot of different things, basically for everything. What box sizing is, if you use the value of border box, it allows you to absorb any padding or border values that you add to an element so that it doesn't increase the overall width of the actual element. So if, for instance, I'm doing something where I want two things on the page and I want each of those things to have a 50% width, I could tell them to be a width of 50% and float next to each other. But if, you know, the problem is that if I then go and I add padding inside of those, it would actually normally add to the overall dimension. So each of those things would be over 50%, therefore they would not float side by side on the same line. So what box sizing does with the value of border box is that it allows for the padding to be recalculated. Actually, what it is that the width, overall width, gets recalculated according to the padding and the border values that are assigned. It does not carry over to the margins, but anyway, so here's the way that you would want to write that. First of all, you would use a wildcard, the asterisk, which means all elements in the page. And then if I wanted to do comma separated, I could also do asterisk and then colon after, like this, and colon before. So let's do asterisk colon before. Okay, and so we want to start typing the property of box sizing. All right, and it pops up, and then we want the value of border box. All right, and this value will work on almost all modern browsers, but if you want to make sure that you catch all of the browsers, then really what you need to do is do some vendor specific rules ahead of time. So I'm going to just copy this. I'm going to copy that like this, and I'm going to paste it. For some reason my clipboard is remembering the wrong things. And Dreamweaver, unless I right click it and say copy, it's not using my keyboard shortcuts. Let's try it again. Okay, there we go. Now this box sizing, I need to put a different vendor specific thing in front of it, so I would do -moz- for Mozilla, and then I also need one, just paste that again, it's not going to copy it. All right, and then I want to use WebKit. Okay, so WebKit dash, and WebKit will cover Safari and the Gecko rendering engine that's in Chrome. So Mozilla is for Firefox, right? So, and then box sizing is going to cover everything, but the WebKit will also cover some like super old stuff, like for old Blackberries and things like that. Anyway, and then by the way, these pseudos for it's a pseudo that means everything after, right? So, and then everything before. And so that would be especially like if you've got JavaScript things that get introduced, you know, after this rule is read, then it will also include pseudo states as well. So, okay, so again, right now you're not going to notice anything because we have stripped the padding off of everything. But it's really important that you understand how valuable this really is. And if you need to put a little comment to yourself, you can. It's making it so that the padding and borders that you add to elements will not increase the overall width of the element if you tell it how wide to be for the entire element. Okay, so the next thing we need to deal with would be adding fonts. And let's just go ahead real quickly and we're going to do a body tag. Okay, and let's just go ahead first off and say font family, and let's just try something like Arial. And by the way, if you're using, okay, if you are using Dreamweaver and it tries to pop up with all these really nice looking fonts, I would recommend that you consider not using them. If you're using Typekit fonts because you have an Adobe subscription, then the problem with using Typekit fonts, there's not a problem if you want to use your Typekit fonts for yourself, but if you wanted to do it, say, for a client, then you need to probably consider getting what's referred to as a portfolio account. You have to pay extra money, and it gives you more page hits. You will run out of page hits if you do work for a vendor or for, for a client, and they've got lots and lots and lots of page hits. You're going to run into problems where you're going to max out your page hits for your own account, and then you're still going to have to pay for more. So if that doesn't make any sense to you, you can look into it as an issue. But I'm going to recommend that we sort of try to stick with Google Fonts for this particular project. And that way, if you don't have an Adobe account and you're using free software and you're not using Dreamweaver, you can also still follow along and use a web-hosted font. So anyway, I wouldn't recommend using anything that pops up here in Dreamweaver right off the bat, because the other thing that it might do is not just use Typekit, it might also use fonts that are on your system, in which case they're not going to show up on other people's system should they not have those nice fonts. And as designers, a lot of times we have really nice fonts. I can tell you right now, like Gotham, for instance, that is not a font that anybody else is going to have. And unless I can get Gotham as a web-hosted font, no one else is going to have it, because Gotham is a very expensive font that you have to buy. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and just type in Arial, and then I'm going to do my fallback as sans-serif. Okay, let's just start with that, and I'm going to save it, and we'll jump over here and take a peek, do our refresh, and then you see it did update the font. In fact, I don't really want Arial though. That's just really a bland, boring font that 20 years ago was fresh and new because we couldn't do fancy fonts on the web. But now we can. So let's go real quickly and let's go to Google Fonts. Let's go. It's actually fonts.google.com. Okay. And we're going to find some fonts that we like. Okay. And so whenever it loads, it's going to load this page. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the stuff about Google Fonts in this demonstration, because I actually have a separate thing that you can watch, and there will be a link on your assignment page in the tutorial page for it. So I'm just going to tell you exactly what I want. I actually know the font that I want to use. I'm going to type in Lotto, and it pops right up for me. And I'm going to click the plus button to add it to my selection. It pops up down here. Now I could use this with something else. I like this particular one because it has a lot of styles though. And if I wanted to click right here, it would show me all the different styles. It would show me the information about this particular font, who designed it, and so on, right? And it shows me right here what all the styles are. And to me, I think that for what I'm trying to do, I could probably use all of these, or not all of them, but I could find everything that I needed in here. And the thing is, I don't really want to load all of these, because loading all of them is actually problematic in that it will slow down the web page. So if I come over here and I decide, maybe some of the things that I would want to try, I could click on where it says customize. And right now, by default, regular 400 is going to be what loads. And that's pretty typical, that the most standard, or they refer to it as regular, font is going to be about a weight of 400 for most fonts, and if the weight is 400 and you make sure that you choose the 400 weight, then most likely if you use strong or M tags for bold or italic, I mean technically those are semantic tags, but you know strong will bold something visually and the M tag emphasis will make it italicized. If you also want it to carry over those standard behaviors, the reset won't undo that we used. But if you use a regular 400 weight, then it will allow, without you having to actually load a specialty italic font or a specialty bold font, it will actually allow you to italicize and bold. If all I were to do is say load though, like the light 300, it might not actually apply an italics to something that I put inside of an M tag, for instance, because it doesn't know how to make it a corresponding sort of fake or faux italicized font. So anyway, I'll stick with 400. I might also want the 300. I might like that. And let's say that I also like the bold 700 as well. All right. And those are the ones that I want. Okay. Now, if I come back over here to where it says embed, you see what it did was it added those weights right here. So if I want to add this, I need to copy this HTML. I need to put that into my clipboard and jump back over here to Dreamweaver. And I don't put that in my style sheet yet. I go over here into the source code, and where it says Google font link goes here, I'll come down to the next line and I will paste that in. And now it's going to get called up and queued up in my web information before I call my style sheet, which is good because the style sheet is where I'm actually going to use the font. So I have to call the font up before I can actually use the font. Okay, so I have to go make the Google API call first, and then I use it in the style sheet. So now I've got that here. I'm going to save this. I'm going to jump back over to my style sheet and over to Google font page, and then it tells me here how to use it, where it says font family, and then it's a Lato, like that, inside of quotes. Now, you can have the quotes or not. In this particular case, you don't have to have quotes because it's only one word. If there was a space inside of here, you know, if it were two words and there was a space in it, you would have to have the quotation marks. But I don't necessarily have to have that. So I'm just going to come back over here and I'm going to put Lato at the very front of my list. And if you want to just feel better about it, you could go put the quotes around it. The problem potentially with putting quotes around it is that if you put the ending quote in the wrong place, it'll mess everything up. So when you put quotes around something, you want to make sure that it's not like when you're typing something for a term paper where the comma goes inside of the quote mark. That's the opposite here. You want the quotes to only be around the actual name of the font itself, and then the comma would go outside of that. All right, so let's go ahead and let's save that. And then now that we have both of those saved, we'll jump back over here to our page, hit refresh, and it loads the new font, right? So now we're looking at Lato. And, you know, it's automatically loading. You might wonder, like, okay, well, how does it know which one to load? Because I didn't tell it which weight to load, and I've got 3 weights there. It automatically loads the one that's called regular. So this would be the weight of 400 everywhere, okay? So if you want to change that, you would need to come back here, and then next you would say font weight, okay? And then I'm going to choose 300, like that, and that'll be the standard font weight for everything inside of the page. And then let's also do a font size as well. And if you want your base font to be a very specific size, there's some different ways that you can approach doing this. You can either do everything starting off in the beginning with a pixel base, so you could say like 16 pixels. By the way, just so you know, 16 pixels is approximately the natural size that it wants to do for 1M or 100%. So if you just go ahead and say, all right, we're going to do it at 16 pixels, then from that point on, if you say M's, it will, you know, you can still have it be based off that. But if you use what are called rems or relative M's, they're going to be relative to your original font size. So the problem, if you haven't ever noticed this, the thing that is good and bad sometimes about text is that it takes what are referred to as accretive rules. So accretive means that they build on each other. So let's say that you set something that's a body size. Inside of the body size, you tell it that you want an article to be a different size, and you're using M's. And then inside of that, you have it be another size. Well, those are all going to be based off of each other, right? And so it doesn't just sort of start, from scratch. They kind of go on a rule of inheritance. And if there's a paragraph that's inside of an article, and the article had already increased the size of the type, then the paragraph increases it more. It's going to increase it based off the already increased size. So it becomes sort of like this almost exponential increase thing as you get deeper and deeper down into, or smaller, as you get deeper and deeper down into everything. So if you wanted to use rems as a relative unit of measure, then what it'll do is it'll come back up here and it looks at the base size that was originally set, and it'll be relative based off of that. The other thing I could do, let's just cut this out for a second. I'm going to go up here, and instead of body, I'm actually going to do one for the HTML tag. Okay, and we'll do font size on HTML. So we'll say font size like this, and then we'll say 16 pixels like that. And then from here, if we want, we can make the body font size then be let's say 15M. Okay, and it'll be based off of this, so it'll be 115% of this, right? So it'll be a little bit bigger than 16, because I kind of like font sizes to be just a little bit bigger than the sort of small standard for a lot of things, because I think it's easier to read for a lot of people. And then if you wanted to give it a line height, go ahead and set the line height like this, and we can make that value be about, let's say 2M, so that it gives it like a nice breathable space in between the lines. Let's save that and let's see how that change is now updated. Okay, and there we go. That's something that looks a little bit more breathable. It's got more room. You might not like this line height. You might think that that's a little bit too big. It's kind of hard to tell whenever the headings and subheadings are all the same size and the list items, we have to go and style all of those things individually. Right now it's hard to tell. So the last thing I want to really quickly show you about that is that if we go back here, just to help you understand a little bit better about the difference between M and rem, is, okay, so if I come down here, let's say, and I've got an H1, for instance, and I want to set the font size for the H1. Let's do font size, and let's do 1M, okay? Let's do that, and I'm going to save, okay? And then I'll go over here to my browser, hit refresh, and you notice it didn't change the size. And just to make sure that I'm really getting my refresh correctly, I'm going to do the shift refresh. And again, it's the same size, and the reason is because, remember, I told you that 1M is basically the equivalent of saying 100%. So if I come back to Dreamweaver and I look at this, well, 100% of the last parent that it was relative to is in the body, which was 1.15M, okay? Well, 1.15M is sort of like saying 115%, so like 15% larger or on top of it, of 16 pixels, right? So this is basically saying it's 115% of 16 pixels, because H1 is inside of the body, and so it is inheriting, because M will inherit the previous module. If you want to consider this box model like modules, it'll inherit its the previous ancestor's font size definition, okay, because H1 is an ancestor of body. All right. Now, if I were to change that to rem, what's going to happen is that it doesn't look at its immediate ancestor, right, to base its reference of its font size from. It goes all the way to the document source, the top level of where the font size was set for the document source. So it's going to go all the way up here to 16. So it's going to be smaller. It's going to basically be about 16 pixels. Let's save that. I'll show you to refresh, and you see here that all these H1s got smaller. They're about 16 pixels large, right? So you see the difference of how that works in terms of like inheritance. So if I jump back just to be really clear, all right, the H1, if you look at this H1, it is a descendant of the body. If I were to collapse the body, oops, well, it should work that way. Yeah, there we go. If I collapse the body, you don't see any H1s because H1 is inside of the body, right? And the body is inside of the HTML tag. So, right, M, whenever I set the body size and M's, the M was based off of its immediate parent or module, which was HTML. Okay, so we set that at 16 pixels. And then whenever I originally set the body to be 1.15 M, right, it was basically saying I'm 115% of 16 pixels, right? And then whenever I had set the H1 and M's, just EM, it was saying, okay, well, it's going to look to the body for its size. Okay, so it was saying, oh, well, you're 1.15 M, and so if I'm 1M, I'm the same as saying 100% of that size. It was still the same size as everything else in the body. But as soon as I said that it was 1 rem, it automatically looked up to the document's source. Oops, the document source up here for HTML, which was 16 pixels. So hopefully that helps you understand how that works. I'm going to try to go back and I'm going to get rid of this altogether and we'll fix it later. But the thing that's kind of handy about using M's is that you can make module font sizes and spacing and margins and things like that. You can make the elements relative to each other in the same module, whereas if you're trying to make something that's going to cascade through the entire site with rems, then you can go up to like a parent definition at the top of the page and you can make that change. Now, the thing that's kind of nice about doing it the way that I just showed you is that if I go all the way up to the HTML size and I set this at 16 pixels, no matter what I do at some point, all of my changes, if I make a change here, it will cascade through the entire website. So for instance, I'm going to save this just the way it is right now. Let's go back and hit refresh and you see everything went back to the way it was. Now, if I wanted site-wide to change everything just to make everything a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, then what I would do is I could go, let's say that I wanted to make everything just a tiny bit bigger, so I could say 17 pixels is the base size for the entire document, right? Then what I can do is come over here now, hit refresh, everything is just a tiny bit bigger, okay? Like the entire thing is going to get, bump itself up. So those are some useful things I think for you to understand about font sizing. I think that it is very confusing without a proper explanation. So hopefully that helps you understand that. And now we can move forward from there.